Shalom, my friends. Welcome to this week's Word Study. Today, by suggestion of my good friend Linda, we're going to be talking about the unforgivable sin, sometimes called the unpardonable sin. Now, let me begin by saying that if you're worried that you might be guilty of the unforgivable sin, you most likely are not, because your concern shows that you're displaying the exact opposite attitude of what the unforgivable sin is all about. Now, those who might be guilty of the unforgivable sin wouldn't care at all, because such persons have no distress and no remorse of any kind about this idea. Now, we see this in the book of Matthew, Matityahu, chapter 12, verses 30 through 32, where Yeshua says, "He who is not with me once and for all on my side is against me, and he who does not unequivocally gather with me scatters uselessly." Now, let me remind you once again, I'm not reading from any particular English Bible version. You can follow along with me in any English version. You'll see I'm not adding to or taking away from the word. But what I'm doing is I'm expounding on the word from its original form, Aramaic, and into, the best English I can give you. Verse 31, "Because of this, I say to you," again Yeshua is speaking, "every sin and blasphemy will be forgiven men. But the blasphemy against the Ruach, Spirit, will not be forgiven." Verse 32, "Whoever speaks a word against the bane of Adam," that's Yeshua, "will be forgiven. But whoever speaks against the Ruach HaKodesh will not be forgiven, either in this age or in the age to come." Now, first of all, Yeshua was not addressing his disciples or the crowds. He was talking specifically to the Pharisees, who had personally witnessed his miracle of completely and instantly healing a blind and mute, demon-possessed man. This we see in verses 22 through 24, where we read, verse 22, "They brought to Yeshua one who was demon-possessed, blind and dumb, and Yeshua healed him, so that the blind and dumb man both spoke and saw." Verse 23, "And all the crowds wondered in amazement and said, 'Could this be the bane of David, the son of David?'" Meaning, could this be the Messiah, Mashiach? Verse 24, "But when the Pharisees heard it, they said, 'This man casts out demons only by the help of Beelzebul,'" meaning Satan, the ruler of the demons. So, rather than acknowledging the obvious fact that Yeshua was exercising divine power, the Pharisees were so spiritually depraved that they attributed his power to Satan. That is the unforgivable, unpardonable sin in this age and in the age to come. The deliberate refusal to believe is what Yeshua calls the unforgivable sin. We take a look at Marcus, chapter 3, verses 28 and 29 reads, verse 28, "Truly and most solemnly I say to you, all sins will be forgiven the sons of men, and all the abusive and blasphemous things they say." Verse 29, "But whoever blasphemes against the Ruach HaKodesh," the Spirit, the Kodesh Spirit of Yahweh, whoever blasphemes against the Ruach HaKodesh and his power, meaning by attributing the miracles done by Yeshua to Satan, has no forgiveness forever and is guilty of an everlasting sin. That is, a sin which is unforgivable in this present age as well as in the age to come, and is subject to everlasting judgment. To blaspheme against the Ruach HaKodesh is to speak words against the Ruach. That is, to deny the work of the Ruach. And that ultimately leads to rejecting the deity of Yeshua HaMashiach. Further, blasphemy against the Ruach is not just a one-time thing. It's an ongoing attitude of rebellion against the Ruach, a stubborn way of life that continually resists, continually rejects, and continually insults the Ruach HaKodesh. In other words, blasphemy against the Ruach is not unforgivable because of something once done unintentionally in the past, but rather because of something being done deliberately and continually in the present. So, don't spend time fretting over whether you have accidentally committed this unforgivable sin. There is no biblical evidence that a genuine believer can commit this kind of sin. And again, fear that one has done so is a very good sign that one has not done so. Those who commit the unforgivable sin are apostates. So, let's look at what apostasy is. Full-fledged apostasy is a defiant rejection of everything in the Word and lacks the kind of conscience that would be worried about such an action as the unforgivable sin, or as speaking against the Ruach and the work of the Ruach. Let's look at what the Word says about apostasy. In the book of Jude, that's Yahudah, we see speaking about apostates in verses 10 through 13 and also in verse 16. Verse 10 reads, "These men sneer at and blaspheme anything which they do not understand. And whatever they do know by mere instinct, like unreasoning and irrational beasts, by these things they corrupt themselves and are destroyed." Verse 11, "Woe to them, for they have gone the defiant way of Cain." It's Cain. Meaning that they are establishing their own righteousness, being their own gods. "And for profit they have run headlong into the error and delusion of Balaam." That meaning that they are loving the wages of wickedness. Take a look at 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 15. And that they perished in the rebellion of mutinous Korah. Korah rose up against Moses. Take a look at Numbers chapter 16, verse 1. Verse 12, these men are rocky, hidden reefs, meaning that they are elements of great danger to others. These men are rocky, hidden reefs in your love feasts. What do you mean, love feasts? The called out ones frequently met together for a communal meal honoring the Last Supper of Yeshua. So at your love feasts, when they feast together with you without reverence, looking only after themselves, they're like clouds without water, blown about by the winds. They're like late autumn trees without fruit, twice dead. Twice dead is speaking about the first and second death we see in the book of Revelation. The first death is physical, separation of your soul, your spirit from your body. The second death is spiritual. It's separation of your soul and your spirit from Elohim. So it says these people are like late autumn trees without fruit, twice dead. The first and the second death is their experience. Uprooted and lifeless. Verse 13, like wild waves of the sea, flinging up their own shame like foam, like wandering stars for whom the gloom of deep darkness has been reserved forever. Verse 16, these people are habitual murmurers, grumbling and complaining, following after their own lusts and desires, meaning that they're controlled by passion. They speak proudly and arrogantly, pretending admiration, flattering people to gain their own advantage. Apostates have the written word, but not the living word. They are those who refuse to love the truth spoken of in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 10. And they are those who pervert Elohim's grace by their loyalty to other things in the world, like theories and worldly organizations. You know, a lot of people say, I think the word means this, that, and the other thing. Stay away from theories or what you think. What we think is meaningless. It's only what Elohim thinks that counts, and the only time what we think counts is when it is in line with what Elohim thinks. So people who get off on theories that don't align with the word, apostates. People who are into worldly organizations, the Jehovah's Witnesses, they say we are Jehovah's earthly organization. What? Where in the Word does it say that Elohim has an earthly organization? Nowhere. Their own theories, and they worship their own worldly, earthly organization, and if it goes against His Word, they side with their organization, not with the Word. That's apostasy. And apostasy is something that begins with intellectual doubt. Just like Satan delivered in the garden, asking Eve, did Elohim really say? Intellectual doubt, that's where apostasy begins. And it ends with physical degradation. The brain and the body starts falling apart. It also involves those who once knew the truth but abandoned it for personal lusts. We take a look at 1 Timothy, Timotheus, chapter 4, verses 1 through 3 reads, "The Ruach explicitly and unmistakably declares that in the latter times some will turn away from being washed by and growing in the Word, paying attention instead to deceitful and seductive spirits and to the doctrines of demons." Verse 2, "Being misled by the hypocrisy of liars and having their consciences seared as with a branding iron, leaving them incapable of ethical functioning." Verse 3, "Forbidding to marry and advocating the abstinence of certain kinds of foods which Elohim has created to be gratefully received and shared by those who believe and have a clear knowledge of the truth." So, what is the unforgivable sin? What is the unpardonable sin? It is strictly speaking against the Ruach HaKodesh, speaking against the work of the Ruach, like the Pharisees. Yeshua performed miracles, and they said, "Oh, he's working by the power of Satan." That is an unforgivable sin now and forevermore. Eternal judgment against those who see the work of the Ruach and say that it's the work of Satan. That's it in a nutshell. And, once again, if you've been concerned, "Oh, I think I created the unforgivable sin, what am I going to do?" You probably didn't, because if you were that kind of a person, you wouldn't be thinking this way. You wouldn't be concerned about it. You wouldn't recognize the Ruach at all. You wouldn't be concerned about your walk with Elohim. There are people like that, even though they have the Word. They have the written Word, they quote it and they speak it, and they, a lot of times they act as though they are authorities on the Word. But they don't have the living Word. They don't have the filling of the Ruach. They don't express the fruit of the Ruach: patience, kindness, self-control, and so on. I have a whole video on that one. So that is the unpardonable sin, the unforgivable sin. And it's not something that's done only one time by somebody, by mistake. It's an expression of a particular kind of person's nature. Apostates, the nature of apostates, they lift themselves up, not Elohim. They want to be God themselves. They want to be right about everything all the time. And it's that kind of a pompous, prideful nature that would look at what Yeshua did and say, "Oh, he's working by the power of Satan, the ruler of the demons." So, that's our study for this week, my friends. As always, I hope and I pray that this study is a beracha to you and to yours. And, Abba willing, I'll see you here again next week. Until then, shalom, my friends.
Now 2,000 years have gone by, it's another working day. Some would rather let it lie, but the question still remains.